Hey everybody, welcome out to our final episode of Demystifying Post-Production for this month. With me as always is Ana Carolina Pereira. Thank you for joining us, Ana. We're very excited, speaking on behalf of everyone, I'm sure. We're very excited to see what you've got cooking up for us today. How are you doing, by the way?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for having me yet again. I'm so excited to get this project wrapped up, finish up
Yeah.
the month, with a complete piece. Hopefully, people enjoyed this month so far and they maybe even have their own pieces cooking.
Mm.
So I'm just really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you. The comments are always like so positive. Like when you're talking, everyone's like, "Oh, she's so brilliant and talented,"
Oh.
and blah blah blah, all the whole time. So we're super stoked about that. Let me get rid of this like housekeeping stuff that we take care of at the top of the hour, and then we'll get to the good stuff with you. I'm kind of bummed that it's over. If I'm gonna be honest, like it's always a bummer like ending these things. It's like cool that it's like, look what we made, it's done. But then it's also like, oh, we're done. So for other webinars like these, tons of free training content happen almost every day with Maxon here. You can go to maxon.net, our website, go to the news page, go to events, and then you can see a list of all of our shows, even our in-person things. And we got some really great stuff. Chris Schmidt, who is absolutely incredible, is coming March 9th. And he does a lot of our work for our capsules, and of course does the Rocket Lasso stuff, and is just an incredible mind and a great trainer. And then next month we have a brand new series that we're starting next Monday, that is Universe for Editors, and this is going to be a really great series with Jason Hare, who is a wizard and expert, and he's really great at making you realize how much you didn't know about simple things. Which is always really great. And as always, these sessions are recorded. They will be live within 24 hours on the Maxon Training Team. They will have really detailed timestamps. You could just jump to parts in the video that you want to cover again. Thank you, Dr. Sassy, for doing that. Thank you also for Max Raharo in the background, who is our resident color expert. The Maxon Color is producing this show and making sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. So thank you, Max. We love you. And then also there is a link that will go on the screen if you would like to get a free shirt or piece of swag like a beanie or a hat, and you just have to pay for shipping. Then you have these two steps you got to do. You can click this link, this exact link. So don't just go like hunting or Google search for the Maxon store. That won't work. It's a secret special store just for our shows. So you go to this link, and it'll ask you for a password. That's the second step. And the password is Sculpting Worlds, all caps. And that's only good for this month, and that will give you one of these wonderful things like this. And all you have to do is pay for shipping to get that. I think that's all of the stuff, all of the housekeeping. So Anna, I'm going to turn it to you for the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's figure out, let's hear about what we're going to be covering this final week of this month.
All right. So for week 4, the goal is pretty simple. We have a scene. In fact, it's not this scene. I have a secret, but I'll show you guys in a second. We're going to level up our scene a little bit with the use of, refining our lighting. We're going to add some particle effects. We're going to go through that. We're even going to make some textures in Photoshop to make things like caustics work today. And of course, then we're going to be kicking it off to Chad to talk about post-processing and how to control the coloring, which is something that I can't wait. I'm so excited to learn all that stuff using Magic Bullets. And let's get into it. So the first secret I have is that this is around how we left the scene last week when we finished. We had 2 little monsters. We did a little bit of set dressing. We discussed how to get the little fake seagrass in. We discussed how to do how to handle the water plane, a little bit of the lighting, etc. Well, if I actually go to my second map, I'm going to go ahead and not save. You can tell that I've made a couple of little changes. For one, I actually posed the little dragons so that they don't look so as stiff as before, even though posing is not necessarily my favorite thing. Let me go ahead and pilot the camera like I showed you all how to do last week. And we can kind of see a little bit more of the progress that we've made. So really all I did was a couple of little things. One, I posed the creatures. I just changed the focal distance. Like I made one of the creatures be closer to the camera, so I had to change the focal distance. Um, and I think I turned down the roughness on the water, which is actually a great little point to make real fast. This is my water instance material right here. And if you guys remember last time, the water was really dramatic. It had so many lights like this in it, right? Which, it doesn't look horrible, but it doesn't look good either. It's grabbing our attention a little too much. Do you guys see the difference with like all these super bright lights? So I made sure to use the roughness, which is kind of how glossy or rough something is, and turn that up a little so that it's not quite as dramatic. So I haven't really married a number yet. Oh gosh, that's even worse. But I think somewhere between 2.2 and 0.3 is where I want to be. So I think I'm going to do for like 0.28 maybe. Something like that, where we can still see those ripples, but they're not overwhelming. And when you're working on your composition, you do have to take these kinds of things into consideration. The eye tends to travel to the point of higher contrast. So, you just got to be careful to make sure that some like more irrelevant piece of your background isn't stealing the show, unless you really want it to. And in that case, of course, then let it steal the show. Besides that, just about everything else is the exact same. I did delete the main light source and then put it back in. And I think the exact parameters and they're a little off and different, but not things too crazy that we have to worry about. So this thing, it reads as underwater, but not really. Only if we're gracious, like, oh yeah, that's totally underwater, like totally, right? But there are a couple of things we can do to just level up this underwater scenario. And just so you guys remember, this is right here what it's supposed to look like. Like so. So we have the water, we have the grass, we have the rocks. We have that like cooler tones, even though our little dragon is pretty not cool at all, right? I guess he's cool in his heart, but not color-wise. And we need a little bit more. So one thing I think is perhaps later we can darken the background a little bit more, but also a little bit of, particles in the water to represent dirt and bubbles might actually go a long way. I always find that goes a long way. Another thing is caustics. So let me show you guys what caustics are. Do you ever go to a pool and you notice how the light hits the bottom of the pool in like these like very fascinating ripply ways like this? Let's make a fake version of this for today. There are thousands, by the way, normally I just use textures I download off the internet, but today we're going to be making our own. There are so many ways to do this, guys. There are actual, quote, what my students like to call proper way, which is like more sophisticated ways that like calculate at runtime, but more sophisticated and more expensive isn't always better. So for today, we're just going to create a tiling texture, something kind of like this. It doesn't have to be exact. Honestly, I'm just going to draw it on with the brush in Photoshop. And then we're just going to make sure that it's tiling. And then we're just going to move it around in the material. So we're going to give it a little bit of animation. All right. So let's go ahead and open Photoshop. And this is actually going to be a tiny little crash course on creating tileable textures for games and also why it matters. So the first thing we need to take into consideration is the size of the texture. So I'm going to create a new project and I'm going to select the width and height. So one of the most important things you need to take into consideration is that all textures, theoretically, should be following the power of 2. I think I mentioned this last week. Power of 2. That is basically a number that is 2 by 2, 4 by 4, 512 by 512, 1024 by 1024. So let's do 512 by 1024 by 1024. I can always go down lower. It's harder to go up, right, once you've committed to one. So make sure it's the same number always. We might not have time for me to go on a whole tangent, but I'll tell you a little story. that really illustrates why it's so important for you to make sure that you get these numbers right. Unreal, it basically encodes these textures, and it's really efficient at processing them in memory, okay, in order to make them work when you're packaging, when you're playing through the experience, the interactive experience, etc. If you go off these numbers, it's no longer good at at compiling it. It's so strange. So one time I was working for a client, and the client's 3D artist sent me textures that were, instead of 1024 by 1024, they were like 1023 by 1023, and that's no longer the power of 2. And all of the sudden, this VR game that I was working on, the performance tanked, just absolutely tanked, and it was horrible, right? And it took me so long to figure that out. I was like looking everywhere, the usual spots, everywhere I was looking. I could not find what was causing this problem until I figured that out. And it was literally just that one pixel off caused the performance to tank. Isn't that horrible? Anyway, that just goes to show. Please stick with the power of 2. I
That's
went ahead.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I've always wondered like what would happen if it wasn't a power of 2. I've just always kind of done it that way. It feels like a religion almost. Like
Yeah.
this is just the way we've done it, and this is the way it always happens.
Mhm.
Like I've always been scared, like crossing the streams. Like what would happen if we,
Yeah,
broke the
it's
rules? So
so
that's
funky.
fascinating.
Okay, so I filled it with black. Black is going to be my base because I'm going to be using this as a decal, or kind of like an alpha, and as we know for alphas, black means invisible, white means fully visible, and then the grays between are kind of like a fall off, like 50% grays, 50% translucent. So I'm going to create a new level, or a new level, I'm still thinking in Unreal terms, a new layer, Control-Shift-N, and I'm simply going to grab a brush, grab like a white color, and let me look at what caustics are actually supposed to look like, right? I'm going to pull that off to the side here. I think that's always a good idea. I had a whole discussion recently about like if reference is cheating, and I think most professionals can agree that reference is absolutely essential, but a lot of students and like beginners still think that um, reference is just cheating. Isn't that fascinating? Have you ever come across that, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, I like as somebody who struggles with art myself, I've often felt like that. Like I'll be a better artist if I don't use reference.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went to Rembrandt's house in Amsterdam. Like you could go to his actual house, and they have like the catalog of the stuff that was actually in his house. And he had a reference room. He had just like a Pinterest board of just his stuff, of like masks and stuffed animals and coins and artifacts from all over the world. And it was like his reference room. Like he would go there when he needed inspiration, and also like when he would have like a painting and he needed like a male figure, he would like have this bust, all these busts of like statue stuff like in this room. And so if Rembrandt is like, hey, wait, what does the skeletal structure look like again? Like if he's looking at reference, like I don't know, I was like, okay, I need to tone down the internal rhetoric on like this stuff about reference.
It's so true, right? I don't know where we got it from. By the way, I'm going to blur this a little bit because it looks a little funky. So we're just gonna, give it a happy little blur like that. But yeah, I have no idea where we get these things from, but who knows at this point, right?
I think it's psychological. It's imposter syndrome. We're trying to prove to ourselves that we're good enough, and yada yada. That
Yeah.
whole thing.
I almost feel like we're trying to prove to ourselves that we're not good enough with that. I don't know if you agree.
Ooh,
Let's
that's
get philosophical in here.
serious. We're getting deep making this caustics.
So, okay, so let's pretend that these are amazing caustics, the best you've ever seen, right? What I'm going to do to make them tile is I'm going to go to Filter, Other, Offset, and basically this will allow me to offset the image by a certain amount of pixels. I'm going to try to get the kind of like the main seam, obviously the seam being this like black part that we can't see, towards the center so that I can kind of like fill that in. And I'll just make a new layer and just do the same thing here. Just, we're just vibing with some wiggles. It's really, honestly, if you guys are watching this, like just go find yourself a licensed version of caustics. But this is awesome to know how to do these kinds of things. It still kind of goes a long way. So I'm going to go ahead and filter this layer. So I'm putting this middle part on a different layer just so that I can blur it separately. Otherwise, the main area of the so otherwise the other layer will start getting more and more blurred as we go, you know. And then I'm just going to do like move it a little bit more again so that I can just get any areas that might be. Ooh, looks like it's only moving my little layer. Let me go ahead and conjoin these two, and then Control E, or Control E to join, Control J to duplicate, filter, other, offset, and just finding the one spot that doesn't look so good. I don't know if you guys can see, like it has kind of this like line on it. And maybe I'll just use a little bit of clone brush or something, you know, just a little patch up. All right, let's see if this works. File, export. I just use the export as PNG option normally. And I'm just going to put it somewhere that I can find later, which is key. And I'm going to call this one T underscore. So here's my like Demystify folder. T underscore caustics underscore A. So just so you guys know, Unreal has a very in-depth naming convention system, which I recommend using if you're going to be using Unreal. So T underscore is the prefix for textures, the name of the texture, and underscore A is the suffix, which identifies what type of texture this is. Is it an alpha? Is it D for diffuse color? Is it N for normal? I use ARM for the ambient occlusion, roughness, and metal, but I don't remember if that's exactly what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And like I always say, I don't spend a whole lot of time trying to make my textures and brushes perfect before I try them. Like, you know, otherwise I might end up in the world of spending a lot of time on something that doesn't work. And this is something I teach in my game development and VR development classes too. Like you gotta, you know, iterate on things and you gotta rapid prototype them. It's just like build something, test it, and then fix it. Build it, test it, fix it. You know, as opposed to like spending forever building it and then it doesn't work in the end. So I'm gonna find my textures folder right here, imports, and I'm gonna go find my wonderful texture, caustics. Beautiful, wow. Gorgeous. And I'm just gonna wait a second while it loads. There we go. So we can now use this caustics texture to create some decals. Decals, guys, are super fun in Unreal. Oh my goodness. I don't think I have any like more advanced decals to show you today. But basically, imagine as if it was like a sticker you could apply to any surface. Or sometimes they also work like projectors as well. So like imagine if you had a projector pointing at a wall, something like that. So people use decals for like posters on the wall, blood splatter, damage, like cracks on the wall. I'm just thinking about walls, but in this case, we're going to use a decal because it's going to apply itself to all these surfaces here. It's almost like, you know, like a projector. So I'm going to go to materials and I'm going to start a new material. Right click material. And I'm going to call this M underscore for material. So material underscore caustics. Open that up. And here we have our material editor. If you guys remember, we've already done some material work on week 2. The very, very basics were covered in week 2. So, you know, go back and find some of those if you need to. But basically, this is the material graph, and this is all the inputs that go into the final material. If you click on this, you'll also be able to find all sorts of settings right here. All right. So the normal material domain is surface, but you have light function, volume, post-process, etc. We're going to choose deferred decal, and that will actually change the material into a decal type. All right. Then I'm going to go find my texture again. And I'm going to drag it in. Oh, I think I chose the wrong one. One sec. Okay, make sure that it's translucent. And then I'm going to go ahead and use that into the opacity. And then I'm going to put a random color into the emissive color, like so. I'm going to just make it white. And that should go right into the emissive color. Like, there we go. So now we're starting to get somewhere. See? we kind of have this very translucent, almost light decal thing. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Always be saving, right? I always say, every time I say save, I'm like, well, this is the most important lesson of the day, is actually to remember to save.
Yes.
Every day's the same. It's always, you got to save. I'm going to
My
stop
rule is
piloting my
like
camera.
once
Oh,
I
go
do
ahead.
something that would be like really annoying to do again, like then I save it. So like if I'm just doing like little like dinky things here and there, you know, like I've renamed a couple things, and if I, you know, it crashed, I had to do it over again, it wouldn't be the end of my life, then it's like fine. But if I do something, it's just like, dang, that'd be super annoying to do that again, then I have to save it. It's like my routine.
Agreed. No, 100% agreed. I also save right before I know what I call dangerous operations, which are like things that
Yes.
I know have like a higher than average percentage chance of crashing the program.
Yes.
Uh, so I have here a decal actor from the Place Actors tab. This is one of the base actors. Therefore, it's, I don't have to import one. I'm going to drag that in. Whoa, holy moly. This kind of like greenish tile grid thing is just what decals look like by default. Do not be scared. Don't be scared. Let's search for decal right here. Grab it again because I dropped it. And now, under material, I can actually pick my little decal material. So let's search for caustics. Gorgeous. Wow. That's exactly what we wanted. So first thing is that it's a little big, it's a little too strong, and it's completely still, right? Oh my gosh, it's so strong. I actually have never done caustics decals in Unreal 5. So we're all learning together today. Okay. So let's go for it. The first thing I want to do is I want to tile this. It's too big, right? Like we can tell. It's like literally taking up the whole level practically. The way you can tile things in Unreal, and this works just like a blueprint editor. You can like do multiple operations to the same texture, multiply things together, divide them. So the way this works is I'm going to use a node called texture coordinate. This goes right into the UVs. This is a UV-based operation. So the UVs being the 2D space in which the surface takes place. Does that make sense? Like, like when you UV unwrap something like we did with the little dragons at the first or second week, we flattened it out. So this is a UV operation because we're just tiling. And then I'm going to change the tiling. Maybe I'll do 10 by 10. Oh my goodness, see that? It's a lot more tiling. So I'm going to apply. Wait for it. It's thinking. Oh, it's compiling. That's one
Oh,
thing
okay.
I've noticed about Unreal 5 is that the compilation times are really long, much longer than they used to be, in my opinion. I don't know if anybody, I don't have chat open, but let me know in chat if you've also noticed the same problem, okay? And if there's a way to get around it. All right. So it's also a little too strong. That's because in Photoshop, I went ahead and I painted with white a lot, right? Which is fine. Like it's all good. But in here, I can actually dim it a little bit. Just like in Photoshop, if I were to multiply my layer that has all this white in it by a black layer, so multiply, I would be able to darken it. So what I can do is I can multiply this by a random color. Like I showed you guys in week 2, the way to get this random, to get a color is you press down 3 on your keyboard and you click. A color is called a vector 3 because at the end of the day, it's an RGB value. So I'm going to go ahead and add like a gray to this, and it should multiply. Let's it update. And you see how it's already getting weaker? It's multiplying just like it would in Photoshop. I'm going to apply this and let it think, let it think.
Yeah, it definitely takes
The reason I
longer.
chose a decal instead of something else is because the decal will apply everywhere at once, which is exactly what I want. Because it also get on the little dragon and all that, which is exactly what would happen anyway. So let's see. I think now it's starting to look a little bit more natural. It's not perfect, but it'll be cooler once it starts animating, I think. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate these. Animation is also kind of a UV-based operation because it's just moving it around. The node we want, I'm trying to have everything open at once. The node we want is called a panner. And what this does, I'm going to put it right between the texture coordinate, coordinate into coordinate, and this into UVs. What it does is it does a simple pan of your texture, which means it will move it in one direction or two. All right. So I'm going to click on my panner, and I can actually change the speed directly in here. If I make it really high, it's going to animate really fast. Can you guys see that? I'll apply it just for fun. This looks like a horror thing, like from a game. Oh my goodness. It's too much, right? It's dancing all over the place. No problem. Let's do like 2. 2 on the X. Even that might be a little too fast. So 0.5 on the X. 0.25 on the X. Guys, this is literally it. I'm sure you all know by now if you use software before, art software, you know that this is exactly how life is when you're doing this stuff. You're just trying your best to find the exact right number you want.
Yes.
All right. And then I'm going to duplicate this right here. Actually, just this part. I can just multiply at the end. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to pan this extra version of the same texture on a slightly different angle. So maybe I'll do like 0.1 on the Y. Maybe I'll even tile it ever so slightly different so that they look like they're layering. And then I'm going to add them to each other. Add. Just like you would in Photoshop, really. I'm going to right-click. One thing you can do is you can preview nodes in Unreal. So start previewing node, and it'll show me exactly what this operation looks like. See that? Gosh, I should have gotten rid of that line. I let one of the scenes get through me. See that? So it's a little bit more crazy, but let's see. I'm going to plug that into the multiply instead, and I'm going to apply. We're starting to get somewhere. Still looks a little too pale and white for me. But just to reiterate what we did is, first we used the texture coordinate node to make it tile. Then we used the panner to make it animate. And we chose a speed on the Y on one and a speed on the X on the other so that they cross each other a little bit more naturally. Otherwise, they would just be kind of like all animating in the same direction. I did the 2 of these so that I could layer them on top of each other by using the add. Then I multiplied them by a dark gray. I'm going to make it even darker. Multiplied it by a dark gray to help kind of darken everything. So I'm going to start previewing this node for you to see. Like that. Actually, I like the way this part looks here. So maybe darkening it was the right call. This goes into the opacity. So this is what's animating right now. I think that the emissive color is too strong, so I'm going to turn that down. If you turn down an emissive, make it darker, it actually shines less. And I might even throw a little bit of that greenish color in there, just for fun. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to stop previewing so that I can start seeing what it looks like right here in the preview. Oh, it's very subtle. Let's apply and see if it's too subtle now. I really dig this look here, though. Like it's funny because it looks like one of those like found footage tapes. Whenever it's compiling. I went too far. I think it's practically invisible now, right? So just keep refining. And if you want to make this easier and you don't want to compile every time, guess what? That's what material instances are for. Do you guys remember we discussed material instances briefly, but I never showed you how really to make one. So a material instance takes all this information from the parent material and makes it easily accessible. And one of the benefits of it is that how do I put it? It compiles on run, basically. So it doesn't have to compile the shaders right away. So what you have to do is you have to turn each one of these pieces into parameters that you can actually access in the instance. So I'm going to right click, convert to parameter. This one's called Caustic's color. This one is called, I'm going to call this one multiply color because it's literally just multiplying. If I wanted to, I could even change out the textures, right? By right clicking, convert to parameter, and I could say this like caustics texture 1. I don't have anything to replace it with. I'm just showing you guys. And caustics texture 2. Furthermore, I could even change the speed, for example, by adding in more parameters, but we don't need to do that today. I'm going to save these, close it, or maybe I'll just leave it open since we might still edit it a little bit. Let's press the browse button to go find it. Right click, create material instance. Let me just move this a little bit. Like so. Now, what I can do is I can find my decal again, and instead of applying the direct master material, I can do the instance. Put that right in there. Open up the instance. Let's make it so that I can see the preview right here. Is that big enough for you guys? And here, I can click all of these things that I want to change. First, you got to click the check mark to make it like make sure that Unreal knows you want to change it. And then you can change, for example, the overlay, and you see how it updates real time. So that's the good stuff right there, because then we don't have to wait. I think there's like a sweet spot around here somewhere. Something like that, that just animates a little bit. Then I'm going to make, I think, the green a little bit darker and a little bit more green, like so. And just keep refining like that. I almost feel like I want to add a rainbow texture to this. A lot of the caustics I saw on the internet have a little bit of a rainbowy vibe to them, so you totally can. You would just go in Photoshop and create a new texture that has that rainbow effect, like we did earlier. Just to make sure that we're done, I'm going to save both. Always be saving. I'm going to go to my camera actor, and I can either right click and start piloting like that, so I can kind of see what's going on. Oh, that little bit of animation does a lot, right? I don't know if you guys agree, but I do.
Yeah, it's very cute.
And then, or you can, of course, go to perspective, cinematic viewport, and select Cine Camera Actor. The cool thing about this one is that I think you're not piloting. Oh, never mind. You are piloting the camera anyway. So it's all good. It's just, you can switch either way. So we have a little bit of caustics in there. And of course, there's so much refinement we can do to this texture. Like you can really go to town as far as things being, how do I put it? Realistic, you know, we can get so much effects, but for basics, for beginners, this is already a pretty good deal. All right. I wonder if there's any questions about, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. That's the only question. I'm noticing that the decal is showing up on everything, which is really cool. Like for caustics, to not have to worry about, you know, projecting it and like all that kind of stuff. And like I'm looking on like the hero dragon's belly, like we're seeing some of the caustics. And so I'm kind of wondering, like if we wanted to like limit that, or like how is the decal working? Because it seems like it's applying to like all around the character, whereas like for caustics we might, I mean, if this is like a big thing, like you don't have to go into it. I'm just, you know, basically just wondering if there's like yes or no, is there like an easy way to kind of like refine what has the caustics applied to it? Because like as a compositor, I'm looking at the bottom of his like jaw, for example, and I'm thinking, you know, I might want to make the bottom of his jaw have less caustics than the top of his head, because the top of his head is like where the caustics are, like, you know, the light surface is kind of like coming on that, and the underneath his chin would be basically just like the reflected caustics, which would be much smaller. Is there like a way to control that? I mean, I love the fact that it's everywhere, but
yeah, there is a way to control that. So I think personally what I would do, if we had a ton of time, is in the actual material editor itself, in here, we can actually set up like different functions for this. So for example, there's something called a what is it called? World aligned material, which basically knows which way is up, right, left, bottom, up, things like that. And we
Mm.
would make it more visible through the like up axis and either
Ah,
invisible
gotcha.
or less visible on the bottom axis. So that's how I would handle this um,
That's
particular
amazing.
particular question. Literally, the material editor is like a world on its own. Um, I taught it at the beginning of the semester at the Raylan College for like 2 weeks, and I barely scratched the surface, and I was covering like a dozen options every day, like, hey, like this is how to do these things. But yeah, that's how I would do that. And it would probably look really cute
Wow,
too.
that's
In
incredible.
looks
Thank
like
you.
in Unreal 5, it's auto solving for the site. So normally decals they only apply from one angle anyway, you
Okay.
know and then the rest looks a little stretched and has it just looks more stretched.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like in 5 it's automatically solving for that. Again, my first time doing decals in 5, and I like it so far.
Yeah, it's great.
uh
I never heard of decals before, so this is really cool to see.
it's really fun. Oh my god, people use decals for everything, and it's so nice. Personally, I enjoy it very much. Okay, so now we have a little bit of decals done. Let's go ahead and hmm, do some God rays. All right. So God rays. Oh my god, we could have a whole day dedicated to this because um there are so many ways to do it. In Unreal 5, we now have volumetric lighting as well, which we can try, but I'm not sure if it will work with the plane as we have it set up. So this water plane, theoretically, is still a plane, that could cause shadows in our lighting, but we could try setting it up from the light source and go ahead and turn on volumetric. Press volumetric shadow, volumetric intensity. I just don't think it's going to work with this particular setting or scene that we have, which is why I planned for today for us to do really cool fake God rays. All right. So let's first of all, I'm going to show you guys what God rays look like underwater. Oh no, Google froze. Something like this. All right. Nothing too crazy. Maybe we should search for like a pond instead. So we're just gonna get some nice little God rays like this. We're gonna make them super simple. We're not gonna make them that jazzy or anything, you know. And we're just gonna do it actually with ZBrush. All right, we're gonna like do a
What?
little fake one with ZBrush. Yeah. So I have ZBrush pulled up. There we have it. I'm going to create a new document so that it takes up all the space on my screen, and then make the document a nice color. And I'm going to start by grabbing a plane. I'm going to edit. There's my plane. Oh, it's so shiny. So, Chad, whenever I was making the Redshift and ZBrush series, FYI, you can check that out on Cineversity. I changed my
Mm-hmm.
default material to be the super jazzy red aluminum, and I never changed it back as in one
I
of the
love
demos.
I love jazzy as a adjective, by the way.
Oh,
So
yeah.
bonus points for that. That's great.
So I just, I made sure to make Polymesh 3D, and then I put a normal material on there, not so jazzy anymore. And a plane is normally already unwrapped. So I can just hit morph UV and see it's already unwrapped. And the best part is that it's 1-to-1, like it's a perfect square. And what we can do is we can just like make the plane longer, maybe even like, taper it or something. Like, so I'm going to, let me do that again, slower. I click on W to get the gizmo. The little customize icon here, I can select the taper option, and it will kind of let me like taper things. And you can grab these little squares to really go to town and make something that's like tapered or wider in one of the sides. Oh, what we can do is we can just straight up paint the God rays on this thing. I'm so excited to try it, honestly.
Oh, no way.
So I'm going to go to subtool and click on the paint bucket, so that our paint icon, which is a little paintbrush, to make sure that I can start painting, I'm going to grab my paintbrush. PA is a shortcut, like so. I'm going to paint it all black. We're doing an alpha just like before, right? Just like we did in Photoshop. Like that. Then I'm going to grab like a grayish tone and start building up some rays in here. We definitely want it to be very slow build up, you know? Maybe I'll even go to Z plugin. What would be a good one? Or sorry, stroke, lazy mouse. And I'm going to turn that on just to kind of get like straighter lines. And I'm just going to kind of try to get some God rays. Try to avoid the corners, okay? I just find that painting directly in ZBrush might actually be more intuitive than painting these in Photoshop for me. Because, you know, you get to see the shape that it's coming out to and look at it from angles that you just can't do in Photoshop. And by the way, this is not the most normal thing to do, mind you. Like, not everybody does their God rays in ZBrush. But I thought it would be really fun. I've actually done a lot of fake particle effects using ZBrush before. One time when I was involved in the beta for, I think it was ZBrush 2021, I used the cloth sim actually to make some like smoke particles.
What?
Yeah, it was super fun.
It's so creative. I love it.
Let me show you guys how that looked. I have to pull up my ArtStation real fast, but then we'll continue with the programmed education of today.
I love it. These detours are incredible to me.
This one, it was ZBrush 2021, and you see these little like smoke things.
Yeah.
This is this cloth sim in ZBrush, and then I painted it black, and just like now, I literally just painted on the parts I wanted to be visible.
That is brilliant. I love that.
So just continue building this up. You can always dim it in Unreal like I showed, but I do like to be a little cautious, you know. I use this stripy alpha too to help a little bit with this process. And then I'm just going to kind of grab black again and just alpha 1, just kind of like soften up the corners a little bit more, just to make sure that we don't, if we cross into the corners, it will get a hard line, you know. Oops. If you're ever like working on something skinny and you're like trying to paint on the corners and it starts wiggling, and just lock the camera right here, this big camera lock button, and then like you can do whatever you want and the camera won't actually change at all. So I'm going to also like dim the sides a little bit more. Like that. And then unlock the camera. I'm going to go to texture underneath the tool palette, where if I could find it, texture map right there.
There we go.
One day there should be AI that like I just say, hey, this is the button I want to find, and it'll like point to it. And then I'm going to hit under create new from polypaint, and it'll literally turn my texture into my polypaint into a texture like this. And you'll notice that it's already stretched into a square, right? Because that's what the UVs look like. So then I can simply go to Z plugin, FPX, export and import. I'm going to do the selected. I'm going to embed maps, and that should embed this map that I have. And I'm going to export. Fancy folder, SM for static mesh. Fake God rays. Underscore 01, because I might have to export a multiple depending on how this one turns out. Let it think for a sec. File exported. Then let's go to my meshes right here. Import and find that fake God ray. Every single time I say God ray, I have this like super funny memory. Let me just import all for a second, and it should import the texture too, because we embedded the maps in the FBX export option. I have this like super funky memory because one time at work, I was looking for all the God rays in the scene, and I was going to delete them. And I was looking for rays here in the world outliner. And I kept finding something called a T-ray, and I just thought, like, man, is that a kind of lighting thing? Like, what is a T-ray? Like, is that kind of like a God ray, but is it a T? So I click on it, and turns out it was tray, and it was just a tray static mesh. I'll always remember the mystery of the T-ray. So I'm going to.
Can I ask you a quick question about that? Because
Mm-hmm.
what you did in ZBrush, and maybe you're about to answer this, and maybe it's just like a weenie question, but like you tapered the thing, and then it looks like it automatically untapered it when you exported it, right? Like it stretched it out to be, so it didn't just fill that space; it stretched it to make a square. So then the rays are parallel. Is that right?
Yeah.
So then why the taper?
I just wanted the shape in here to be a taper.
Oh,
Like
okay.
that.
So then it makes the alpha tapered, but then it stretches the texture to be square?
Yes. So when we UV, it's always going to, it could have some degree of deformation, you know?
Okay.
How'd I put it? The UV on this is a perfect square. So it was grabbing the like vertex color information on each one of the little verts, and it's just applying it to its own location on the square. I don't know how to explain it.
Okay.
But
So
if I
like
go back to here in ZBrush and look at this, right? Let's go to the UV map and morph, and you'll see, wow, it didn't like that. But basically, that's what the texture would look like if it wasn't, kind of angry at me right now.
okay, sorry, I'll let you keep going so you can not interrupt your flow here.
Oh no,
I'm curious about
okay.
this.
Please continue.
Such a brilliant trick.
I'm gonna create a new material. I'm gonna call this one M_GodRays. I'm gonna go ahead and just apply it to my plane, just right off the bat. Open that up, and you already know it. We're going to grab our texture, GodRay right there, and that goes into our. So of course, there's no opacity because by default, every material is set to opaque. So in this case, I have two options. I can do masked, which is, masked, which is what we did for the little fins on these little guys, which I changed yesterday actually. And we can do translucent. Masked is basically a 0 or 1. It's only cut out. And translucent gives you all of these extra values in here, like to have 50% translucency, etc. So I'm going to choose translucent. I'm going to apply this to the opacity. And then, of course, press 3 and the color for the emissive color. I'm just going to do like a white-ish color for now. Hit OK. And let's preview it. Wrong button. Like so. Not very gorgeous yet. I'm still going to save it anyway. We actually used fake God rays for the summit background. Yeah. For the light coming through, like that, like rotunda window, for example. Yeah, we totally cheated like that. And it's, everybody does it. It's just one of those ways of life. It's a little strong, as we can agree, I think. So same thing as before. Let's multiply this. Multiply by a little gray color. It doesn't really matter if you put actual other colors in here, like a dark green, because this is only reading black or white values for opacity. So I'm going to go ahead and save that.
Why wouldn't you change the emissive color? Wouldn't that do the same thing if you darken the emissive color?
You know what? You're right. It would. Let's do that instead.
Oh, no. I wasn't trying to correct you. I was like, I'm curious. Like, it feels like there's like some kind of like brilliant reasoning that I don't know, and so I was curious.
Oh yes, the brilliant reasoning of me just doing stuff today. So let's go ahead and turn this into a parameter. Right click, convert to parameter. This is going to be emissive color. Of course, we can always parameterize this, but it's not necessary for right now since we really just don't have options. All right. Save that. close it. Oh, let's go find it real fast. God rays, right click, material instance. And let's apply that to this God ray. Oh, here's a very, very neat, nifty trick. I used Unreal for years, guys, before I learned this. See that when I click on this God ray, I can select it. Sometimes when you try to select transparent things, it doesn't work. The key is to press T on your keyboard. T for transparency. If I press T, it toggles on. Press T again, I can no longer select transparent things. Super useful. Oh my gosh, it can be a nightmare. I'm pretty sure that's why I was looking for those T rays, because I got tired of like not or selecting them on accidents. You know, while I was trying to select the stuff behind it. Anyway, so I'm gonna drag this. Now the material instance is applied, and then we can just change the color. Like so. A lot of people use ZBrush for this kind of alpha card situation. Do you know that? You guys know that? ZBrush is actually a pretty neat tool when it comes to hair cards. Hair cards is something that we use in games for creating the hair. Let me show you guys a visual. Something like this, where all the hair, like the strands, are put on a flat card that has an alpha on it. And it becomes something like this. See that? Okay. And in ZBrush, it's actually really easy to place these cards because of the deformers. This is what the textures might look like for something like that. And the deformers make it really easy to, like, you know, curve the hair in certain positions and things like that. So it's not uncommon for ZBrush to be used for the placement of these cards. In fact, when I do hair cards, I actually use ZBrush to bake the textures. I use fiber mesh for this stuff here. Then I use whatever software I want to do the actual cards themselves, and then I place them in clumps on ZBrush. The reason I'm telling you this is because if we want to clump up the God rays so that they are more visible from every side, see how they're just facing one direction? I can't even, let me press F so that I can see it. See how it's only facing one direction as I turn? If I wanted to, I could, for example, do multiple here and press Control and drag to have two, and then I could just kind of rotate them like this. And this will actually make them more visible from multiple angles. It's kind of like a funny little game dev trick. Like so. So Control, drag. Like so. Just try to get them into a position where they're visible from multiple angles. Maybe I'll even make some longer than others so that it looks more organic, more fun. And then I can export this. Plug in, export, and I'll just make this God rays 2. This is not the most tech artsy demo I've ever made, but like you'll so come to find that sometimes it's not worth all the effort of like coding something from scratch or like, you know, spending R&D days trying to get a perfect God ray when you can just go the easy route. You know, I actually had Joe Jobst come to my class last week or the week before to do a demo about VFX because he's like a leading VFX artist in the industry. He worked at like, what was it? He worked like Red Dead Redemption and I think a bunch of other games for like 20 years. And he was like, you know, I use Houdini to make some effects, and we're all like, oh yeah, Houdini, yeah. And he's like, yeah, but normally I just draw them by hand because it's easier and faster and I do it pretty good. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know, I totally get that. Actually, that's totally fine. But you'll come to find that students don't quite like hearing that, you know, at least my type of students. They're like, no, I want to learn the fancy stuff, you know,
The full way,
the fancy way,
the time consuming.
All right, so there's, oh, I accidentally imported the texture in, but that's okay. There's my second set of God rays right here. And if I apply the same material to it, browse, you'll notice that it's more visible from multiple angles. See that? I guess not every angle because I didn't account for some of them, but like that. I can also come in here into my original material and God ray, and I can set it to be two-sided, just like we did for the little wings. That way it can be seen front and back. By default, Unreal will only put materials or any color on the, like, what do you call it, the top parts of the polygon. So now let me delete the old one. New one. See, oh, look at it. It's every direction, and it almost looks like it's animating too as we rotate. See that? Fancy. All right, let's use that instead. And I'm just going to kind of place them around. And while I'm doing this, I actually learned this trick from YouTube tutorials. I don't know, Chad, if you've had this experience, but sometimes when you're looking at YouTube tutorials and then you'll click on one that has like 40,000 views and you're like, this has got to be good. And then turns out it's just like a speed run, like kind of thing, like look how good I am kind of vibes.
Yeah. Yeah, tutorial
well,
should be like in quotation marks. Like.
Right, yeah. I learned that you think you're really cool, but I didn't actually learn how to do the thing. Anyway, the idea is that whenever you're doing like a simple composition that's just supposed to be like seen from one frame, it's really good to look through the camera angle, you know, as you're placing stuff. That way you actually do have some sort of creative power over that frame. So I learned that from observing one of those videos. So I guess I learned something. I should thank him. Can you tell I'm like really salty about those kinds of tutorials? Yes. That growing up, like whenever I started learning, it wasn't even that long ago. It was, I'd say like 10 years ago or something. Like there just wasn't this amount of resources online, right? I'm sure you relate, Chad, depending on how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, 23 years. Yeah.
20. Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, you can relate a little bit. I'm pretty sure it was much, much worse when you started then.
Yeah, there was no YouTube. Yeah.
And, you know, it was like that. And you just had to like try to put the time lapses on like a slower speed and just try your best, you know? That was quite fun times for us. But I learned a lot of ZBrush actually doing that, you know? I used to love, like, it'd be like a Saturday night. So I would like grab like a hot chocolate or something and watch this guy sculpt dinosaurs.
Awesome.
With no voiceover. Electro dance music.
Oh, man, I feel so seen right now.
So if we want to go fancy with it, we can, of course, animate the God rays to... for example, I could maybe like multiply or add a different version of these God rays here. And maybe like add. It's going to make it brighter. So, of course, we're going to have to change the emissive. And then add a little panner. Maybe not to both of them, just to one. I like to use the either the plane or the square preview most of the times. You know, if you guys can see, it's so weak. I'll turn this up for now. And then maybe I can, you know, just turn like a tiny speed on the X or something, just to kind of have something animating. Like, oh, that's too much. And also, I think I want the Y, not the X. Currently, I'm listening to the Sea of Thieves soundtrack. Very nice.
The what soundtrack?
Sea of Thieves. Have you ever played that game?
No.
Actually, kind of neat. Looks like I want negative. I might be wanting to negatives too. Let me check. I'm going to compile. Oh, too strong. But let's see which direction the sun is. Oh, yeah. See how it's kind of like, you know, moving upwards like that? I probably want it to go the other direction. So -2. And then save. Now everything I want to do can be done through the instance. Okay, just to wrap up, I don't want to take too much time because I want to let Chad have his round here. Let me just turn this down a bit. because adding them does make it brighter. So, a couple of particles. Let's go for it. Right click, new folder would be good. Where's the folder button? There it is. Particles, like so. And then what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to create, first of all, just a really basic particle effect. I just want like floating debris. And I believe there's already a template for this. We're going to be using Niagara. Okay. A lot of you guys might be wanting to use Cascade. That's, legacy.
They still have Cascade in Unreal 5?
You know what? I'm not even sure they do. Probably as a plugin or something. I'm really glad to see this because my students keep using Cascade for their homework right now. And I keep telling them, like, why did I show you Niagara for 2 weeks if you're going to use Cascade? All right, so effects. And I'm going to go over the tiny basics and then to make sure I give Chad enough time. So,
you're fine. I could adapt.
You sure? Yeah. The first thing we have is a Niagara system. This is the actual system that you're going to put in your game or scene or interactive experience, okay? So you can't actually place any of the other types like an emitter. You can only place a system. So I'm going to go ahead and create an empty system. And I'm going to call this one NS. That's my naming convention for Niagara system. Oh, and it auto-saved and stopped me from finishing. Okay, good. Niagara system, debris. And then I'm going to create a Niagara emitter. The Niagara emitter, think of it as a component for the system, a part of the whole. And I'm going to create a new emitter, and I'm going to choose template. Hanging particulates is what I want. This is basically a system that just has like particles hanging in the air, or I guess in this case, the water. Finish. And make sure to play around with all of those different templates. For the second particle, we might make it from scratch though. And E_debris. Let's open that up. And let's also open up the system. Oh my goodness, the UI. It's enough to make a grown man cry. And I'm going to go ahead and add the emitter into my system so that I can put it in the level. So I'm going to right click, add emitter, and parent emitters, debris right there. Save. And there we have our hanging particulate. It's already practically done, right? Like I feel like this could be put underwater and we can call it debris and just change the color. We're going to do. So let's go ahead and drag the debris into the scene. And let's see what that looks like. It's a little big, right? That's the first thing that I notice. A little big, a little bright. But I think that once we get the settings down, it might look cute. So let's do it. Since we are working with an emitter, and right now I'm in the emitter. Since we're working with an emitter that's already been done, there's a lot of options already in here. Let me make this full screen. We can actually preview it in here in the preview window that are already done. The idea here being, how do I put it? The emitter has all of these modules that change its behavior, and of course we don't have time for everything. The idea is, under render, we have the type of rendering that we're going to see. So right now it's a sprite. A sprite is basically a plane that faces the player that has some sort of texture material on it. And also, for example, add a mesh renderer, let's say, that has like a mesh in it. Where's the mesh option? I guess it's not in here. It's okay. We don't need a mesh anyway. All right. I'm going to turn that off. Delete it. So this is what we're going to see. The particle spawn is how the particle comes to be. Where is it spawning? What happens to it when it spawns? What color is it? Things like that. And then the update is what happens to it in its life. By the way, I recently learned this at the Unreal Fest last year, that there's a limit to how much you can zoom with your mouse wheel when you're looking at nodes, and when you're in the material editor, blueprints, even here in the particle effects Niagara. If you hold down Control and keep zooming, it actually zooms more, which is actually really nice. My students love that. Yeah, it's awesome. Took me all these years and an expensive trip to Vegas to find that out. All right, so we kind of already have something going on. So again, what happens to it when each one spawn, each particle, each one of these little guys is a little particle. So what they when they spawn and when they update and when they render. So let's go ahead and look at the color. I think we can go ahead and change this to a darker brown color. Hello. Like so. Maybe even darker. It's becoming harder to see them though, which is kind of good. I'm going to say okay. And I'm going to search for scale. I always find that this UI is a little overwhelming for me. So I like to make it a little bit easier to navigate by searching things. I'm very used to the node-based system. That's what I tell my students. Like, I'm very used to the node-based system, and Niagara has all of the makings of the node-based system, but it's more of a stack, right? You see, like how it's all stacked here. So every single option is always visible, which for me isn't my favorite. I think I have too much ADHD. Let's go ahead and see the update. Oh, that's kind of cute. It's not bad. Starting to get somewhere. It's almost like very magical, you know?
Super cute. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some particles a little too close to the camera. They're not too big now. They're just too close to the camera. So I'm going to go find them. So let's search for particles or my debris. Yeah, they're right on the camera. That's would be part of the problem here. And let's just move them out back here. Let them update. Water looks a little funky from this direction. Let's go ahead and see the camera again. No, they're too far away. And it's just a song and dance. So, though you guys all know what it's like. Where is the debris? Big mystery of the century. Oh, somehow I moved it outside of the bounds. When in doubt, I'm just going to hide the water to make it easier for me to see. Click on debris, press W. Yep, looks like I absolutely absconded with this thing. You press F when you have something selected, you'll be able to frame into it just like you would in ZBrush or most 3D modeling software. And then it kind of centers itself. And I'm just going to put that kind of like near the dragons. I can get myself a little preview right here. There's quite a few. Oops. Okay.
There you go.
I think I'm also going to turn down how many there are, which can be done. Let me show you. Let me just pull up the camera again. Okay, that does not look bad. It looks cute. Actually, I'm not even sure I want to turn it down, but if I wanted to, it would be right here in the spawn rates, and I could choose how many right here are being spawned. So maybe like 35 instead of 50, and that's how many are spawned at a time. And let's see how that looks. It almost looks like it got more. Let's turn it down to 20. I'm doing it on off screen. And by the way, all these icons, they go away if you press G. I think I brought that up. And let's also press Control H to bring back the water that I had hidden. And we're already starting to get somewhere. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like just the hanging particulate helps quite a bit with the what do you call it? The underwater feel, underwater vibes. I was thinking about using Photoshop to create some extra like muddy fog planes, to layer as we go like back into the level up there. It's kind of like create this effect of depth, but I think we might not even need to. Chad, you want to take this brief intermission to talk about post-processing?
Yes, I do.
Yay.
This is like amazing. This is a tough act to follow. You did so many like amazing creative things. Okay, so we're seeing my screen here. And what I want to just talk about briefly, just for a second, is talk about Magic Bullet Looks, which if those of you that use Magic Bullet Looks, it's like this great plugin for After Effects and Premiere, DaVinci Resolve. It's used for color grading, color correction, but also could be used for effects. And so if you're trying to create quick color grading in Unreal, as we looked at last week, it's kind of difficult. The controls aren't very helpful or very user-friendly. As is often the case with going down deep stuff when you're in Unreal, like we just looked at with like Niagara, like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So in order to set this up, you have to do a couple things. So you have to have Magic Bullet Looks installed. So Magic Bullet Looks is not something that comes with Unreal. You have to have a trial or the full version of Magic Bullet Looks actually installed. And also, what's really critically important is that it needs to be installed after Unreal is installed. So I had Magic Bullet Looks installed before I installed Unreal 5. And so it didn't show up on Unreal 5. So then I had to uninstall Magic Bullet Looks and reinstall Magic Bullet Looks, which sounds like really time consuming, but it took like 10 seconds. It's like really quick. But so then once that's installed, you can go to the settings and then go to plugins. And this is an important factor. Let's see, 1 second here. And okay, so then in the plugins, I want to do a search for Magic Bullet Looks, and by default, it should be toggled on if you have it installed. But if it's not installed for whatever reason, then you can check this, and you'll need to restart Unreal. But there you go. So there's Magic Bullet Looks inside. Once you have that check mark, you know that you have it. So the way that we get access to it is by opening up the Place Actors. Let's see here. Where's my Place Actors panel? Okay, now I'm missing my Place Actors. Show toolbar. No, that's not right. Okay, let's... Oh,
so if you go to Window okay, all the way at the top, and you can actually find the Place Actors.
Place Actors from there. Okay, so right above, so Window or this drop down, Place Actors. Yeah, I'm used to having that kind of like open by default. And then we have Place Actors, and this is where we can search for whatever we want. And then in the volumes area, you can find the Magic Bullet Looks thing, or from anywhere you could just search Magic Bullet Looks volume. And what this does is it basically creates a post-process volume, which is like a really standard thing in Unreal that adds a lot of just effects and whatever. It's a very common thing. So the Magic Bullet Looks volume is just a post-process volume with Magic Bullet Looks. So here in my Dragon Map Start level, I'm going to go ahead and drag this in, and there we go. And I have my my camera view pinned here as Ana taught us last week. But now I have my Magic Bullet Looks volume. Now, one of the cool things about Magic Bullet Looks, or kind of one of the annoying things, depending on what you want it to do, is that the volumes can take up a specific space. So let's say you had a character that was like outside the water, and then when they walked into the water, you wanted to have it like be like a totally different feel. Or maybe they go through a portal and you wanted to have it be like a completely different dream world, where only when they're in this geographical area, they have this Magic Bullet Looks adjustment. So that could be really cool, but also if you just want it to, exist and be everywhere, then that can be kind of annoying. So with your Magic Bullet Looks volume selected, you could go down to post-process volume settings, and then you can check infinite extent. And that will make sure that you don't have to worry about like the bounding box and where it's at and making sure everything is just going to cover like the whole world. Infinite extent. It's going to apply to everything. So now on my my post-process volume with Magic Bullet Looks, I can scroll down to the Magic Bullet Looks area. And everything else here, again, is the exact same as a regular post-process volume. But I can go and click on this button, which will open the Magic Bullet Looks interface. Now, while I was doing this, setting this up, I realized that there is a bug I discovered on Mac for Unreal 5. This is not the way it's supposed to work. So like right now, I don't have a preview of what's going on in my scene. And so this kind of like really limits the capability of what Magic looks to do, the functionality. It's kind of, I mean, it still works the same, but without this preview, it's very difficult to do like, you know, color corrections, things like that, because we can't see this preview. But that's not normally the case when I've done this on Unreal 4 or on a PC. It's worked just fine. But as I mouse over the word looks on the left-hand side, see it goes away when you come over here, but I mouse over the word looks, and we have all of these different categories of looks. So I can click on, you know, blockbuster, like Hollywood blockbuster looks, or if I want something kind of like grungy, or if I'm looking for like a horror movie, that type of stuff, I can click on a category and then go to, you know, one of these cool looks. I can just click on one of these parameters, and then it changes the whole entire color of my scene. Just to show you what I'm talking about, let's say blockbuster cool, and maybe I'll say like Ice Palace. And again, we can't see anything here, but I'll move this out of the way, and then I'll click OK, and then wait for it. And then now this is with the Ice Palace theme, the Ice Palace preset look in Magic Bullet Looks. And I'm going to go ahead and click that because I don't like that. But that's how easy it is to kind of scroll through. And if this wasn't bugging out right now, then you could just click your mouse over, just roll it over, and you could just preview all these different looks. You could see the interface updating. Just as you mouse over, you're just seeing all these different looks applied to your scene, which is like really cool. I forget which one that I used. Maybe it was Iced Wing. Oh no, it was Nerds in Space, because I thought it was kind of thick because they're cute little dragons and they're in a space. I don't know. I thought it was cute. So I'll go ahead and click OK on that. And this is looking too green and too washed out, but I can go through, and what's kind of fun is that I can click on any one of these blocks that we call them, these blocks that it applied, and I can tweak the settings. So if I don't like the colors, I can go to Colorista, which is where the colors are coming from. And with a really graphical interface that's really easy to use and make sense of, I can cool the highlights a little bit. I can cool the midtones. I could even you know, saturate the shadows to make those more cool. And using these outer bands here, I could adjust this further. So the center of this thing controls the hue, and then the left side controls the saturation of the hue, and the right side controls the brightness of this particular category. So with the shadows, if I wanted to darken the shadows, I can click and drag this down. If I wanted to darken the midtones, darken the highlights, again, very easy to just kind of like just glance at this and get things the way that you want. So I click OK, and now we're having something that's a little bit more under the watery. Another thing about Magic Bullet Looks, I just want to show you really quickly before I turn it back over, is if we go to the tools area, we hold our mouse over that. So again, if I'm going over here, it automatically disappears by holding my mouse over tools. We can see all the different tools, and these are the categories of tools in Magic Bullet Looks. So under selective, these allow us to choose different areas. So we can choose the exposure, we could do spot exposure. So if we just want to highlight an area of the scene, or if we want to add kind of like a fill light that lightens the shadows or whatever. I could also go into the camera and change things that the camera would do. So if I wanted to add different effects. So for example, we talked about going into ZBrush and like painting like God rays, but there is like a shutter streak here. Now this is not the same thing as God rays. This is kind of like more like a light effect that would happen with the lens where it's bright at the edge of the frame. But because of this, you can use this to fake God rays. So as I accept this, then you're seeing that we have these kind of like streaky rays coming down from the top, which again, the end result of this was to create a still image, and this could work for a still image, but if we were doing an animation, then the effect is kind of lost with the animation. But I could go into Magic Bullet Looks again, And with the shutter streak selected, I can, change the size of this or take down the boost so it's not nearly as bright or whatever. And there's also optical diffusion. Ana mentioned like doing some stuff around the edges, like creating kind of like a blurry type effect. And there's these, effects here that do similar things. So there's like chromatic aberration, which we added last week. But the one in Magic Bullet Looks I find to be better than the one in Unreal and more controllable when you're using a version of it that doesn't have a bug that allows you to not see what's going on. And there's also things like optical diffusion, which kind of gives us like a nice bloom, which adds to the underwater feel of things. Edge softness is one I think that would work really well here without needing to go into Photoshop or do anything like that. So if I add the edge softness tool, this kind of gives us a little UI where everything inside of this circle is sharp, and then everything outside of this solid circle is blurred, and then this is the graduation between the two. And so then you could kind of choose where you want to center things. And as I click OK here, then we'll see that we now have our little dragons in focus, and then everything else is kind of, softened a little bit. The edge is softened. Again, this is less like a depth of field and more like, like a lens effect, something that would happen like an old-timey camera where the edges are blurred a little bit. And this is a little bit aggressive for my taste, but we can, dial this in and get just like a nice, softer, more subtle effect if we want to, or if we wanted to kind of fake a temporary depth of field with this, we can do it that way. Also, another thing to point out here, there are flares, so like a haze and stuff like that, which I think is really great for this scene because it makes everything it makes the lights kind of blurry, I guess. And when you're underwater, especially if there's going to be dust particles where it's just kind of like a slightly dirtier scene, like a little bit of haze, a little bit of like lens flare can add to that feeling that we are underwater because there's just more volumetric stuff in the water for the light to bounce around in. And what I did is I got the settings where I wanted them, and then I clicked this little button right here, which allows me to save the preset. And that way I can use it whenever I want to. I can go back to it whenever I want. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here because I already did that. Another thing, when I first made this, I'll show you in a second here. Actually, I'll just load this up. I'm not going to save that. I'll show you the final version that I created. But when I did this, you'll notice that there are multiple versions of presets because I didn't do this. I didn't build the lighting first. So like each time I loaded Unreal, the presets looked really bad, so I'd have to make another one. And then I realized, oh yeah, I have to build the lighting. So you want to go here with the build, and you want to build the lighting only. And you could also build the reflections, build the reflection captures, and that will kind of like lock in the color adjustment and everything like that, so that you're going to get consistent stuff. So otherwise, if you don't do that, and the lighting is just kind of like cached and it can change from the time you open it to the next time you open it, then when you apply the color, it's going to be different and screwy. So be aware of that. So once I built the lighting and I did this, I got this like a little bit of warmth to bring back some of that stuff, but you could see like the kind of like optical diffusion, the kind of haze, a little bit of softness around the edges. I also added a vignette around the edges. So it's kind of like a cool way to do a lot of more advanced color correction stuff easier and in a more visual way than you could inside of Unreal by itself. I strongly prefer it, especially when you have a version that doesn't have a bug. Yeah.
That looks super cool, Chad. Like, I want to download that myself because while you were going over that, I was trying to do it straight in Unreal and comparing. And like, I definitely think it could use a little refinement. So I downloaded the app. Now I just got to get it working on my end. And I want to learn so much. That is so neat.
Yeah,
such a little thing that could
like
elevate all the stuff I make, right?
Yeah. If you want to like saturate something, if you want to like, create these kind of effects, like, this isn't the greatest thing in the world, but there is a little bit of chromatic aberration. There's a little bit of softness around the edge. There's a little bit of vignetting. There's like the streaky light from the top. There's a lot of little things going on here that can make this feel more underwatery. And if I had a monitor that was working, a software that was working, I could see the color grading to be able to, I could warm these up a little bit more and kind of like dial this in. But I think the effects that are going on here, it's still really cool. And to think of, again, to think of the post-process volume as an area that we could just like walk into this and then all of a sudden, or like we go in the water and then, we step into this world. It can help us create more like immersive experiences using the looks post-process volume. So that's fun.
I wonder how, like, let's say I was making like a proper game, right?
Okay.
I wonder how using this would impact performance, or if at all. I don't know if it would, right?
I haven't played with like the real tininess of it. Like when I have all these effects going on, like if you look at my final deal here, where's my Magic Bullet looks, oh wait, I have the wrong thing selected. Looks, here we go. There we go. When I look at my final, my gosh, my scrolling is like out of control. Scroll like a little bit. So if you look at all these effects that I have 2 different lens vignettes. I have HSL colors, optical diffusion, chromatic aberration, edge softness. I mean, I kind of just like brought the entire gamut of stuff. And so I think that this is probably going to slow things down a little bit. So it would work really great for the sequencer though, if you're going to like render out like cinematics. But even for like in-time gameplay, if you're just doing like just like a little bit like normal things, I would imagine that it would still be real time. But I don't know. I haven't played with it enough to know. But I have noticed like you can see like the water, even probably over the webinar, you could see that the water is like a little bit slower with all these effects. So it's not like perfectly real time with all the stuff that I have on there. But that didn't happen right away.
But it's still really nice for these kinds of renders done.
Yeah.
Which are getting more and more popular anyway, with Unreal. Because people used to think of Unreal as a game development software, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we still refer to that as a game engine. But guess what? It's not a game engine anymore. It's just, I guess, just an engine,
Yeah.
And it's quite fabulous in the way it works. So
Yeah, virtual
I always tell my
production,
students,
too.
like, you guys realize how lucky you are that you're learning Unreal exactly at the right time to become an expert at something that's going to be used in every industry.
Yeah.
Just about, it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Pretty chill stuff.
Very cool. Thank you. Yeah, I can turn it back over to you. That's all I wanted to share about that, but just something to be aware of. It's kind of fun.
Okie dokie. I don't know if they can see my screen. I think
Max
somebody
is...
There you
Yeah,
go. There you go. So yeah, I was trying to follow along using these sliders. And to be honest, I don't know what most of them do. But I was just like, scrolling around and messing with it, Let's see what happens if I up the contrast on my shadows. Oh my god. Oh no, and I've been it looks like, when in the game is when you get damaged and you're about to die and the vignette turns red.
Yes.
All of a sudden I feel very threatened. Okay.
That's so funny.
So let's make some bubbles, folks, because that's the last thing we need really to call this one done. Well, I mean, it's never done, right? Like me, Chad. Last time we did a Demystifying series, I worked on the project for like an extra 2 months. I never finished it, by the way. Anyway, so let's go ahead and right click. We're going to create 2 new files, just like before. A Niagara system, empty system. This time we're doing it from scratch, ns_bubbles. And then we're going to create an emitter. Niagara. Hold up. FX. Sorry. Emitter. New emitter. Empty. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and call this ne_bubbles. The emitter, of course, will go inside the system when we're done with it. I'm going to get this emitter going. I just did a bubbles demo on last Tuesday. Let's see if I remember anything. So the idea is we're going to start off by initializing some particles. Looks like by default, the empty system already has a sprite renderer, which again, plain, facing the player, always has a texture on it. I'm going to delete that. Goodbye. What I want to do for bubbles is a sphere. Like I want a sphere mesh. So I'm going to add, see this add button here? I'm going to add a sphere mesh. So mesh renderer, like so. And now you guys can't see anything, but basically in here, I found the button, by the way, from earlier, meshes, right here. This is where I can select what mesh I want to spawn when I'm doing my particle. So I'm going to go ahead and search for sphere. Any sphere is good. And still nothing because we haven't spawned any in. Let's go ahead and spawn some in. So under particle spawn, I'm going to search for rate. Oh, wrong one spot. Emitter spawn. Spawn rate. This spawn rate basically allows you to choose how many of the individual particles are spawned per second, basically, and it's continuous. I'm going to turn it to 20, but you'll notice that it has an error right here. In Unreal 4, which is the one I'm still using in school, this error is big, red, and angry. Here, it's more discrete. But basically, a lot of these modules have dependencies. For example, any module that requires force, like a physical force like gravity, needs a module called calculate forces, something like that. So I just always hit fix issue. I love this part, by the way. It says here, dismiss the issue without fixing. I know what I'm doing. I never hit that one. Fix issue. No matter how often I do these things, like I'll never hit the button that says I know what I'm doing. So there we go. There's my particle, and it's actually right now spawning in 20 of them, but since there's no real force or animation to it, all the 20 are just in the same spot. Okay, what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to choose a shape location, and this will basically make sure that they don't all spawn in the same spot. Instead, they're spawning more in a shape. I might need to do a couple extra steps before it starts looking good, but we're just going to leave the shape location in there for now. Then under updates, because update is the lifetime of the particle, I'm going to search for gravity. Gravity is a great place to start. Add a little gravity, hit fix issue, aka I don't know what I'm doing. And now we can tell that my bubbles are falling, right? The gravity is set to negative 980 on the Z, which means it's falling with quite some force. That's the natural gravity of the planet. I'm going to set it to plus 20. And it's going to start slowly rising. See that? We can turn gravity upside down. Isn't that wonderful? Maybe I'll turn it up even more. But basically, it's spawning all these particles and making them go up. No problem. These spheres are actually huge, but it's okay. We'll fix that later. All right. So what's next? Next, I want it to be less even. See how they're very extremely even? Like they're just kind of going up in a single burst, I guess, like in a single line. I'm going to add some extra forces to this, specifically curl noise, my favorite. Curl noise force. And it'll basically, you can kind of tell it's already like just barely curving. It's basically going to add some forces from different curly angles is what I like to call it. And let's see what happens if I turn this to like 100. Woo, it's like crazy all over the place. Wow. Not necessarily what we want. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it knows that I specifically am more interested in the Z axis for this, and it's going to continue to rise. Ooh. So it looks more like a foam than a bubble for now. That's okay. Let's go ahead and go back to the mesh render and find the scale and turn it smaller, because right now I think the scale is kind of like getting in the way of us previewing, because this shape's scale is actually 1 meter by 1 meter. So 100 units by 100 units. Let's go ahead and turn it down to like 0.1. And that will make it smaller. And it'll at least help a little bit. See how the bubbles are starting to go away from each other? Curl noise did all that. Curl noise, again, it's kind of like just a physical force that just comes from multiple angles, And I made sure that I set it to 20 on the Z because I wanted it to mostly focus on the Z axis, because otherwise it started curling down and to the side. I don't know if you noticed earlier. And I made the noise strength more extreme as well. So it was set to, I think, 1, and now I set it to 100. And already we're getting something that reminds me slightly of bubbles. And what I want to do next is I want to change the bubble size over its lifetime. Because basically, I don't want to be able to see it spawning from this one point. See that? I want the bubbles to start really tiny, get really big, and then get really tiny again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another node under particle update again. If it's happening throughout its lifetime, it's in the update. And I'm going to search for scale mesh size. This node, it's breaks every time. Okay, even though there's no like, hey, you should fix this. It breaks every time. What you need to do is you need to go back to initialize particle, which kind of has like basically the settings for initializing, like starting up the particle. And under mesh attributes, you need to set mesh scale mode to uniform. It's just one of those things. I can never explain why we necessarily have to do that step. All I know is that if we don't, the what do you call it? The scale mesh size breaks everything. So that's just a pro tip. When it comes to particles, I do find that there's a lot of dependencies, which are more extreme than most other types of work I do. Okay. So anyway, now I can scale the mesh size. For example, I can change it in here directly, XYZ, the vector, or I can do a curve over its lifetime to animate it. Let's do that. I'm going to click down here, and basically I can change the parameter type or the variable type, really, into different things. So I'm going to try to make a single curve. To do a single curve, I need a float, which is basically just a single number, as opposed to a vector that is 3 floats. Each one of these is a float. So I'm going to do a vector from a float, and that way, well, I don't know if you guys noticed the change. If I change this number, it will change evenly on all axes. See that? Man, that curl noise is really going to town. But I don't want to do that. I want to change it over a curve. So I'm going to click this little down button again, float from curve. And now, see how it's setting to from 1 to 0? That's basically scaling it already. So see how they're getting smaller as they go up? What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this preset right here. Ramp up, ramp down. The size starts at 0, gets big, ends at 0. See that? I think that the middle size is too big, so I'm just going to drag it down a bit. And it's using that to scale the mesh over time. Very fancy. I think that's too many bubbles. Let's get the spawn rate down to like 3. Let's see what that looks like. I want it to be more subtle, I just don't want to see bubbles everywhere. Like so, and I think I want to turn the gravity down as well, because like it feels like they're just like really going to town, like really like leaving orbit over there. So I'm going to turn them to 10. Do you think that's more peaceful, or do you think I need to turn it down more?
That still feels like slightly violent to me, but
Okay.
No,
let's I do need going downwards now. It's funky. I think the curl noise is now too strong.
Oh yeah.
No problem. 40 maybe. As usual, we're doing this song and dance. And also I'm going to go ahead and make the scale mesh size again smaller. I want it to be much smaller. Let's try it on the level. I'm going to save this before I lose it. And I cannot simply add this to the level. If I go to browse and I try dragging this into the level, nothing happens. Okay, you see how that it has like a little forbidden sign right there? So I need to put it inside of a system. So I'm going to find my system for bubbles. Bring that here. Right click, add emitter, bubbles. So I hit parent emitter, save that, and then let's see where I want these bubbles to go. Whoa, shouldn't be moving my camera all over the place because it was at a perfect position earlier. Okay, we'll fix that. So they're still a little too big, but they're not necessarily bad. They do look like bubbles so far. Of course, the material does not, but nothing we can't improve. Have it like kind of coming from the sky, So let's take a look at the emitter again. So no problem. We're just going to make it even smaller, microscopic even. Apply. Yeah, that's better. Curl noise though, still too strong because it's like literally making the bubbles like go down. So no problem. Make sure the gravity force is set to a. Since we turned the gravity down, it was actually doing a lot of work to pull the bubbles up. So now the curl force has been exposed for what it truly is. Um, so I'm gonna turn that down. So like maybe 3. Let's just go like the easy route on this. Maybe 5 here. Apply. That's better, right?
Cute. Yeah.
All right. I could spend literally the rest of this whole episode trying to fix these bubbles and make them perfect. But I would like to take a moment and apply a couple of particles, like, so not just this one, like let's apply a few, like maybe like back here, you know. I might make an extra version of this that has way more violence so that it looks like this guy's like swimming towards us, you know, with more curl force and whatnot over there. Maybe a couple of these like nice cute ones off in the corners, kind of just like make the level cuter more aesthetics than anything.
Oh yeah, that's cute.
You know, so like off here to kind of look like there's like little shellfish or something. I asked somebody yesterday, I was like, hey, what do you think my level needs? And they go like, how about an entire ecosystem and more creatures? And I'm like, okay, that's not what I needed to hear. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Now, I have a question about the Niagara thing because you have to put the emitters in a system and then add the system to your scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, what if you want to add then? So then your Niagara system has a bubbles and like a dust thing, right? So like, what happens when you want to add just like one more bubbles or one more, like you want to add like another instance of bubbles or another instance of like dirt or something like that?
So I made
You want to
two
add
different
another emitter.
systems.
Okay.
I made 2 different systems for the dirt, one for the dirt and one for the bubbles. So I could
Oh, okay,
theoretically
gotcha.
change them separately. But if I wanted to, like, there's nothing that can stop me from putting multiple emitters in the system. Check it out. So I'm going to grab my bubble system. And then I can right click and add any emitter I want. So there's templates like a fountain. I'll just throw that in there. And now I have my bubbles in a fountain, but I think the fountain is distracting from my bubbles. My bubbles are pretty subtle now compared to the fountain. If I click this check mark here, I can kind of see one without the other. Where's my bubbles? There they are. They're tiny. Then there's the fountain. Okay, so you can stack these, and in fact, that's what the method is. Like, let's say you're doing an explosion, you need so many different parts, you know, to the explosion. So, yeah, you're definitely going to be using this kind of stacking system in the emitters. Gotcha. So let's make a material for the bubbles. Like a lot of people say, VFX is 50% particle systems and 50% materials. So let's go ahead and grab a material. Right click, new material, M_bubbles. There it is. Booblies. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Okay, let's get that open. And I think I'm going to go simple for this one. All right. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it translucent because bubbles are very translucent, right? And I'm probably going to do a simple number for the opacity because opacity, it's at the end of the day, it's a black or white, right? Black is 0, white is 1. That's one of the main lessons you can learn. And so if you just add a number, this counts as like a 50% gray. See that? If I wanted to, I could also add a color by pressing down 3 and holding. And I'm just going to make the bubbles white for now so I can kind of see them. Like so. One thing you have to know about translucent materials is that they actually don't take on lighting very well. They're very flat. You see that? And there's no option for that unless we switch to there's a little option here somewhere. Let me just remember what it is real fast. Lighting modes, and I think it's surface translucency volume is the one I want. Let's find out. It seems right because now I have roughness, specular, metallic, and all this stuff in here. So let me try adding roughness. I'll just add another number for that. So to add a single number, you just press 1 and hold. And you'll notice that there's like a pattern here. 3 numbers is pressing 3 and holding. 1 number is pressing 1 and holding. Guess what? 2 and hold. That's 2 numbers. Nice. All right. And see how it's starting to reflect light? You can kind of see how it's reflecting mildly the building right there. If I leave the roughness at 0, it will do that. It's like really shiny. Okay. Glossy, more like. Then I want to mess with the refraction for a second. 1 number for the refraction. The refraction will basically bend the light. Ooh, good start. The refraction bends the light inside of the object or like through the object. You guys know about refraction in physics. You know, we deal with it when we're doing water, when we're doing glass, transparent things in general. It just bends the sunlight, so it changes the angles at which we see things. And if you notice, look at the angle of the building compared to the background. See that? So we got a little bit of refraction going on. Let's see. I don't remember if going up makes it more refractive or not. Give it a sec. It's calculating. Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. It's breaking. So 1.5, I think, is like the refraction for water versus air. I'll leave it like this for now. And also, this is a new material thing that I haven't shown you guys this month. And in fact, you know, I could do, like I said, I could do like multiple months of material and we wouldn't be done. So what I want to do is I want to have the outside of the bubble be less transparent and the inside be more transparent. So this right here is going to get masked. There's a wonderful way to create this mask, and it's called the Fresnel. It's written Fresnel. And basically what it does is it creates a mask based on the angle of the surface compared to the camera. So the middle of the surface is facing directly at me on a sphere. So that will be like one part of the mask. And then this stuff that's facing away will be another, and it'll create a nice gradient. So what I want to do is grab a Fresnel, like so. And I can even right click and start previewing and see the difference. Let's see what this node does. See that? It's creating a mask, black and white mask. And you'll notice that like half of the stuff we're doing is just the different ways to do black and white masks, you know. It's a black and white mask. You can actually change like multiple the settings here. I'm just going to leave them alone because we're not even going to see the bubbles that up close. Anyway, it's not going to super matter today. But basically, I want to blend 2 different values for the opacity, one for the center and one for the outside. So let's try it out. The node we're looking for, first of all, let me make 2 versions of this. So maybe I'll do like a 0 to make it really dramatic or something on the center. The node we're looking for is called a linear interpolate. What an interpolate does is it blends between 2 values, 2 colors, whatever. So linear interpolate. So it blends between A and B using that alpha that we just created. So if we right click and start previewing, I might have plugged them in wrong. Oh, actually not. So the middle part is A, where it was white before, and it's completely black, see, which is the 0. And the outside is more bright. So it's using this mask to blend these 2. A being, let me check. Okay, A being 0 and B being 1. So this will be applied to the black stuff, and this will be applied to the white stuff. Let's put that into the opacity, right-click, stop previewing, and let's see if that does anything. Let it compile. I think it's cute that the refraction comes in first. Oh, look at that. Kind of a cute little bubble thing. Let's just try this one now. I'm going to apply it. And I'm going to apply it to my little bubble inside of the Niagara. Where is it? I have so many windows open. Hold up. Okay. Right here. Inside of my Niagara emitter, I can go to Mesh Renderer. Let me find my little emitter. Where is it? Where are my little bubbles? Can't even see them. They're so tiny. Okay, it's all good though. Where's the material? Let's find it. Enable material overrides, turn that on. Override materials, add. We're going to add our bubble material. Save. And let's see. It might be compiling, or I might have accidentally deleted something. Where are my bubbles?
I had high hopes for that one.
We're going to get there.
Cool.
We're going to get there.
We're going to do
We're doing everything right. I think maybe it's just too invisible. That's always an option, right?
Yep, totally. Maybe they need to be like bigger since we fiddled with the translucency, maybe?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Let's try that. Mesh, scale mesh size. Let's put that back to 0.5 or something, or just 1. It's going to be huge. Save. They might just be like slightly invisible because, oh!
There they go.
They're just too small. Okay, let's not do 1. Let's do like 0.3. Save. Still too big, right? But it's cute. We're getting somewhere. 0.15. Half as big as it currently is. Let's see what it looks like through the camera as well. I keep unpinning my camera on accident, so let's do that. I feel like some of the bubbles could be this big, like the corner, the edge bubbles, but these should be smaller. Also, I think that we need to turn up the opacity on them just a bit because they are a little too invisible. So instead of 0 opacity, I should probably do like 0.1 opacity here and maybe like 0.6 over here. Save. Whenever I have more time and I'm doing like this full lecture, by the way, I do add some displacement and things like that to the material. But like I mentioned, week 1, displacement's kind of been removed from Unreal 5. So there are some situations where I don't know how to react to those news, besides just being really sad. Because like I believe, again, like I believe they want you to use nanite for your displacement of meshes, but there are some things like little bubble animations. Like how am I supposed to use nanite for that? Let that save.
That's interesting. I didn't realize it was like applied to internal things with materials as well, in addition to like meshes that you would like bring in or something like that too. So that's interesting.
I love using displacement. Like we use it for so much stuff in the industry. Like for example, like if you see like cloth banners swinging in the wind, like that might be material based, things like that. I really like these. These need to be smaller. I think I'm going to make a copy of the system. We only have a couple of minutes left. Like like I said, I could do this all day long if you guys would let me, and just like turn it into one of those follow along streams. But I know that there's so much time, so I'm going to do like small bubbles. Open that up, and you can actually do some edits to the emitter inside of the system too, depending on what it is. So I can just come in here, mesh size, and make sure that the mesh size is smaller for these. Save that, and then come in here and replace this with the small bubbles instead. Let's see. Yay. Something like that, more discreet. I don't want the bubbles to like take up all of the attention. I do like these like little bubbles off to the side.
Super cute.
But yeah, we have bubbles. We have, I think the lighting, like honestly, I was going to do a second pass today, but I think it's passable. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. It
We might
works
just end
for
up making it worse.
the time allotted too. Like, I mean, we covered so much stuff. So that's pretty
Yeah, that too.
incredible.
I'm always like, how much can I squeeze out of this much time? So I
No,
don't
it's great.
remember
I think we
exactly what
focused
the
on the right
perfect
things.
angle was, but hey, yeah, I guess you can't always win.
Is
Oh,
there some
this
kind
is
of
when
like
it'd be a great
lock or
time to
something?
turn this on. There
Is
is
there
a
something?
lock. Yeah, I should have locked it. Uh-huh.
How do you do? Is it an easy thing to do?
Um, I think so. I can just click on the camera actor and just lock it right here.
Oh,
Nope.
okay, yeah.
But apparently it doesn't lock that much. I guess. Oh, no, this lock doesn't actually do what I think it does. No. There should
Hmm.
be a lock, but when in doubt, maybe just save out the location somewhere. Right click
Okay.
copy, throw it on a notepad like
That's a good
that, and
idea.
then just paste it back in when you move
That's
it.
brilliant. That's a great idea.
You can literally just paste this in like as is. So you can just grab that, Control C,
Oh, that's
or
cool.
copy it in. Yeah.
That's a cool trick.
Yeah. So besides me messing up the camera briefly, I think that basically covers most of what I wanted to do today. Of course, this isn't what I consider to be a finished piece. I'd say this is a great start. um, if I do say so myself for us, Chad, today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. Like, I mean, the fact that like over 4 weeks, like you taught us all these amazing things, you answered all of my constant interruptions and questions and stuff, and built these little guys in this world with the rocks and the water and the whole deal with the bubbles and everything. I think it's just really incredible. All the programs we jumped into to Substance from ZBrush and then here to Unreal. I mean, this is like a lot of stuff that we did and a lot of stuff that we covered. So I think you should be really proud of this final result. I think it's incredible
Thanks.
that this wasn't even created to be a work of art. It was created to be, a teaching thing. And it also is an adorable work of art that's warms our hearts. And it's fantastic. So thanks for all of your efforts this month with all of these sessions on. It's been incredible.
Thank you so much for having me. Like, it's been so much fun. Give me something to look forward to. A little bit of a challenge too, because like it's not every day you're making a underwater scene just off the cuff. Um,
Yeah.
and I can't wait to continue. Like, honestly, I want to take this one to completion. But I say that every time though. But we'll
Yeah.
see how
I
this one
remember
ends
last
up.
year we did the thing with the Kraken, the underwater
Yeah,
scene.
which was
We
also
just have a
underwater.
we just have a
Yeah.
thing where just like put stuff underwater, make it difficult for ourselves, but the results are fun. It is really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
So,
it's got its forgiving qualities as well, because not everybody knows what underwater looks like anyway, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah, that's true.
yeah.
Yeah, and first you have to do some more of that reference stuff where you're like going and digging and getting like, what does it look like when stuff's underwater and what are the properties and caustics and yada yada.
Yeah.
So a lot of really fun tricks too. The painting in ZBrush, that's just like I still can't get over that. And even like the Photoshop caustics, like it really works. It's just such a simple, quick thing, and I don't know. It's just a lot of great tips throughout this month. So again, thanks for being so generous with sharing your wisdom with us and your experience and stuff. So um, all right, I guess that wraps us up then. I guess like that's the end of the deal. Thank you again to Ana Carolina for all of this magic that you have bestowed upon us so graciously, and for Max in the background producing, and Dr. Sassy making the timestamps so it's easier to go through on YouTube. And I'll get that off my screen so we don't go through the vortex of eternal screen repetitions. But thank you all again so much for being here. And we'll see you next week for the universe session for editors. And thanks again for joining us, for your comments, being a great audience. We really appreciate it. And take care. Have a great day.
Bye bye everybody.